The alien shoved the human diplomat off the levitating platform with a disgusted flick of his tendril. The man screamed as he plummeted into the gravity well below, vanishing in a puff of blue smoke and bureaucratic failure. From the judge's towering podium, a voice echoed like thunder over the Star Court's amphitheater. "If this is Earth's brightest mind, your planet is guilty of criminal stupidity." The entire galactic concord laughed, a hideous, cacophonous blend of clicks, gurgles, and snorts. At that moment, Earth was one vote away from extinction. 3 days earlier, Staff Sergeant Rex Granger was in a Florida swamp, waist-deep in mud, teaching a raccoon how to disarm a bear trap using a stick and a slice of bacon. His beard was unkempt, his shirt long forgotten, and he reeked of whiskey, sweat, and a faint whiff of something that might have once been victory. The raccoon, cleverly named General Fuzz, was almost getting the hang of it when a black, humming aircraft broke the tree line above and hovered silently. A ramp lowered. 2 men in suits stepped out, sweating through their collars. Rex looked up, squinting against the sun. "If this is about that incident in Guam, I already apologized to the island. Twice." The taller man stepped forward and said, "Sergeant Granger, Earth needs you." Again. Rex spit into the mud and muttered, "Poor bastard planet." In the United Nations Emergency Crisis Chamber, deep beneath the Rockies, world leaders looked more panicked than ever before. Earth had been invited, more like summoned, by the Galactic Concord to prove its worth as an intelligent civilization. What started as a diplomatic discussion turned into a humiliating failure when the chosen representative tried to explain memes, capitalism, and Instagram filters as cultural highlights. One alien asked, "Do your young actually lick toilet seats for status?" The human choked on his water and said, "Only some of them." The Concord labeled humanity a species of uncivilized brutes with volatile emotions, erratic hygiene, and unpredictable mating habits, and declared the final vote of galactic acceptance would depend on a series of sentience trials. No weapons, no armies, just one representative to face the challenges. The best Earth had was already vaporized. That's when General Cartwright slammed a dusty file on the table. "We tried our best. Maybe it's time we try our worst." The file was marked, Operation Human Disaster. Rex was briefed inside the aircraft en route to the Concorde's orbiting station. The pilot explained Earth's fate rested on 3 trials of intelligence, survival, and diplomacy. Rex picked at his teeth with a toothpick and said, "Intelligence, huh? You sure you called the right guy?" The pilot didn't smile. "You're not here to pass the tests, Sergeant. You're here to survive them long enough to scare the galaxy into letting us live." By the time Rex stepped onto the Galactic Concord Starcourt, he had already punched a translator drone that buzzed too close and yelled at a floating orb that tried to skin him. The courtroom, a colossal chamber of chrome, pulsing lights, and suspended platforms, buzzed with the presence of over 300 species, most of whom looked like something a toddler would draw during a sugar crash. A 7-eyed gelatinous being glared at him from the prosecution stand. "Is this thing your representative?" It oozed, offended. "He smells like fermented protein and wet aggression." Rex cracked his neck. "Yeah, well, you smell like regret and fish sticks. Let's get on with it." The judge, a towering, skeletal figure with glowing veins and robes that shifted with gravity, slammed a staff onto the platform. "Earth will proceed to Trial 1, Survival." Before Rex could ask what that meant, the floor beneath him vanished, and he fell. He landed hard on the rocky soil of Croc 9, a death world famous for hostile wildlife and acid rain. His only weapon? A survival knife and whatever grit he had left from a career filled with gunfights, ambushes, and bar fights in 5 countries. His opponent was a native beast, a towering, kite-and-armored quadruped with pincers, acid saliva, and a name that translated roughly to the Screaming Digestive System. Rex stared it down, breathing calmly. "Okay, Big Ugly. Let's dance." The next 24 hours were a blur of stalking, baiting, and improvised traps. Rex used sharp rocks, flexible vines, and one unfortunate lizard with explosive venom to take down the beast in a thunderous landslide he triggered using a hollow tree as a lever. He stood victorious, half naked and smeared with blood and mud, munching on roasted alien meat. Back in the courtroom, the Concord sat stunned. The judge leaned forward, voice low. Impressive. Yet perhaps accidental. Try me again, Rex said, wiping his mouth with a leaf. Got plenty more accidents left in me. Trial 2 was scheduled for the following cycle. Rex was placed in a logic chamber with a sentient slime known for devouring prisoners who failed to solve its riddles. The chamber was sleek and sterile, lined with reflective obsidian and covered in shifting glyphs. The slime pulsed and chirped telepathically, its riddles forming in Rex's mind like half-remembered math problems. Rex stared at the first puzzle, then at the slime. Listen, goo guy. I don't speak Sudoku. But I do know how to cheat creatively. He proceeded to trick the slime by rearranging its own reflective walls to show answers the slime had stored visually for later use. He solved every puzzle without understanding a single one. The slime, deeply impressed, squelched in admiration. Your logic is chaotic, but effective. Welcome to Earth, Rex said, lighting a cigar. Trial 3 would be diplomatic. Rex would have to participate in a cultural exchange ritual with a species that communicated only through harmonic resonance, singing, to be blunt. He was given a translation collar, a robe, and a strange two-stringed instrument. Seriously? He growled. Y'all want me to sing? The ritual began with a 12-minute alien opera performed by creatures who glowed in tempo. When it was Rex's turn, he cleared his throat, adjusted his collar, and sang one of the few songs he knew all the words to, Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire. The aliens gasped. Apparently, the song's frequency translated to I desire union of spirit and flame, which, unfortunately, was the highest form of a marriage proposal in their culture. An ambassador fainted. Another one burst into iridescent tears. Rex said. Was it something I sang? Back in the galactic chamber, murmurs swept across the Concord. This human was dangerous, not just unpredictable, but wildly effective. He made no sense, followed no logic, and operated purely on instinct, guts, and strange Earth humor. That night, as Rex tried to sleep in his assigned cell, he overheard 2 Concord agents whispering through the walls. They'll never pass. It doesn't matter. The trials are for show. Earth dies either way. He sat up slowly, eyes narrowed. So it wasn't a fair trial. It was an execution wrapped in ceremony. Rex lit his cigar, exhaled slowly, and whispered to himself. Well, guess it's time to show them what uncivilized really looks like. And somewhere in a nearby storage bay, General Fuzz the raccoon escaped from his hidden crate, dragging a small pouch filled with explosives and mischief. The ground of Croc 9 still steamed with the blood of the beasts Rex had slain. The skies above rumbled with electric storms, and somewhere in the distance, a winged predator let out a scream that sounded like metal scraping over concrete. But Rex wasn't looking at the sky. He was staring at the small, silver orb floating in front of him, blinking red like a judging eye. It translated the judge's words back from orbit. Survival trial, complete. Proceeding to logic evaluation. Prepare for immediate transfer. A flash of light engulfed him. One moment, he stood among broken rocks and alien bones. The next, he was in a perfectly spherical room with no doors, no seams, and no sound. The air was too clean. The silence was so thick it made his ears ring. Then the floor rippled like liquid mercury, and from its center rose the opponent for trial 2. The sentient slime known as Zerlix was considered one of the most advanced minds in the Concord, a being whose thoughts folded on themselves, processing logic at speeds no computer could rival. It glowed faintly in hues of blue and green, shifting with every breath it took, if it even breathed. Rex squinted at it, chewing on the stub of an alien root he'd picked up earlier. It tasted like licorice mixed with regret. A pulse shot out from the slime and echoed in the room. Instantly, patterns of light flickered on the walls, runes, numbers, and symbols morphing endlessly into puzzles that looked like a cross between ancient Sudoku and pure evil. The orb translated again. Solve or dissolve. Rex walked up to the first puzzle. It was a wall-sized equation composed of geometric shapes and rotating glyphs. The orb chimed. Time begins now. He stared at it. Nothing made sense. Not even a little. He scratched his head. Right. So that triangle is either a 7, a death warning, or an alien middle finger. After 2 minutes of absolutely no progress, Rex stepped back and looked at the reflections on the obsidian-like surface of the floor. And there it was, part of the answer. The slime had been projecting its own thought process onto the reflective walls, solving the puzzle in its own mind. Rex grinned. Oh buddy, you're good. But I've cheated at blackjack in a biker bar run by angry cyborgs. You're not the worst thing I've outsmarted. Using the slime's own logic trail reflected subtly across the room, Rex reverse-engineered each solution. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't clean, but it worked. One by one, the glyphs lit up green, puzzles collapsing into solved patterns. The slime rippled, clearly stunned. Rex wiped sweat from his brow and winked. You ain't the first genius I've confused into submission. Zerlix approached and extended a tendril. Instead of attacking, it tapped the center of Rex's chest and then withdrew with a squelch. The orb interpreted. You are a mess. But you are a fascinating mess. The chamber dissolved into particles, and once again Rex was teleported, this time onto a floating platform surrounded by glowing crystal columns. Around him sat hundreds of Concord representatives, watching silently. It was time for the third trial, diplomacy. A trio of beings hovered across from him, glowing like translucent jellyfish with multiple eyes and tendrils that pulsed to the rhythm of subtle vibrations. The orb buzzed at his side. Species Harnaki. Communication, harmonic resonance only. You must perform a cultural expression song in their language to demonstrate emotional intelligence and connection. A stage rose beneath his boots. The robe they gave him itched. The instrument had 2 strings and looked like someone fused a banjo with a wind chime. Rex held it awkwardly. I can't even play a harmonica without offending someone. What happens if I butcher this? The orb buzzed. Their language is highly contextual. Incorrect frequencies may trigger offense, mating responses, or declarations of war. Rex looked at the alien crowd. Then back at the instrument. He had nothing to lose. All right then, he muttered. Let's see if the universe is ready for Johnny Cash. He cleared his throat and began strumming the 2-stringed alien instrument with absolutely no finesse. His voice was raspy, low, and weathered, like gravel and bourbon had a baby, and he launched into a slow, uncertain rendition of Ring of Fire. The moment the first verse echoed across the chamber, the Harnaki froze. Their bodies glowed red, then pink, then bright lavender. One began to quiver uncontrollably. Another floated backward in what appeared to be a swoon. The vibrations translated as complex emotional ecstasy. By the time Rex hit the chorus, one of the Harnaki released a cloud of pollen into the air and floated gently toward him, tendrils extended in what could only be described as alien flirtation. The rest of the chamber was silent. When he finished, the room didn't erupt in applause. Instead, one of the elder representatives leaned forward and whispered, You just proposed galactic marriage to a sacred priestess of the Harnaki, using fire metaphors. Rex blinked. Well, that explains the lavender glow. Despite the awkwardness, the performance was accepted as a successful diplomatic demonstration. The orb announced, Trial 3 complete. But even as the crowd processed the bizarre triumph, Rex's eyes flicked upward. High in the rafters, 3 Concord guards whispered into a communicator. He couldn't hear them, but he could see their tension, their urgency, the glance toward the exit hatch. And he knew a lie when he saw one. Later, in his assigned quarters, really more of a well-polished cell, Rex sat on the edge of his bed, listening to the faint buzzing through the wall. Someone hadn't double-checked the frequency blocker. He heard 2 voices, clipped and synthetic. Doesn't matter if he passes the trials. The council already voted. Earth gets wiped once it's over. We just need to make it look fair. The voice on the other end replied. Then remove him after the final trial. Quietly. Rex's hands clenched into fists. So that was the game. Trials were for show. Diplomacy was for optics. And Earth? Earth was a resource-rich dirtball with too much personality, and not enough power. He stood, cracked his neck, and looked at the corner where he'd hidden the small emergency beacon he'd fashioned from a stolen comm chip, a toothpick, and the wiring from a translator drone. He pressed the side button once. Hundreds of miles away, deep in the ship's cargo hold, a small, tactical raccoon wearing an eye patch and carrying a stolen stun baton squeaked twice, then scurried into a ventilation shaft. Rex lit his cigar and stared out at the galactic stars beyond the glass. "They want a performance," he said quietly. "Let's give them the show of a lifetime." Aboard the Concorde's primary vessel, nestled within its warring core, Rex walked calmly through a hallway filled with surveillance drones, patrolling guards, and an overwhelming scent of sterilized betrayal. His boots echoed against the metallic floor as his mind ran wild with calculations that didn't come from textbooks but from years spent surviving jungle ambushes, desert sieges, and one time, a bowling alley brawl that somehow ended in a hostage rescue. He wasn't just thinking about escape. He was planning something far worse. He was planning a statement. A stolen security pass dangled from his belt. It hadn't been easy to acquire, mostly because the guard hadn't expected a headbutt followed by a pressure point knockout. Rex made a note to teach the move to General Fuzz later. Assuming the raccoon hadn't already taken over half the ventilation system. He turned a corner and slipped into a restricted section labeled in 3 alien scripts and 1 human translation. War Simulation Arena. High Council access only. Inside was a chamber unlike anything Earth had ever imagined. Dozens of worlds simulated in containment domes. Each used to test combat strategies, diplomatic scenarios, and, if the whispers were true, full-scale invasion rehearsals. In the center of the room floated a holographic map. Earth sat blinking red. A countdown had begun. 3 days left. He stared at it in silence for a full minute, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack of bubble gum, unwrapped a piece, and popped it in his mouth. The act wasn't necessary. It just made him feel like a cowboy again. A cowboy with access to intergalactic sabotage. Bleep, the cowardly but absurdly useful robot Rex had befriended during the logic trial, rolled in through a side vent, one wheel sparking slightly. The robot beeped, blinked twice, and transmitted an encrypted file directly to the stolen orb Rex still carried. It showed internal memos between the Concorde Council, authorizing Earth's destruction regardless of trial results. The proof was irrefutable. Rex leaned down and patted the robot's dome. "Nice work, Bleep. You're officially promoted to Honorary Weasel." Bleep whirred, unsure if that was an insult or a medal. Now came the part Rex both hated and loved, making it personal. He rerouted the internal broadcast channel to a private council archive room, where he knew the corrupt trial judge, Magistrate Collinth, spent most of his time watching pre-galactic soap operas and polishing his ceremonial gavel. Rex burst into the archive chamber like a man who'd lost his last bit of patience. Collinth didn't look up immediately. Then he saw the human with a cigar and a blade made from sharpened star alloy. His tendrils curled in alarm. "You don't knock?" the magistrate hissed. "Didn't grow up with doors," Rex said. "You lied. You lied about the trials, about Earth's chances. I've been neck-deep in alien blood, bear traps, interspecies music competitions, and for what? A fake seat at your table?" Collins smirked, which looked especially ridiculous on a face with no lips. "Earth is chaos. We did what was necessary." "So am I," Rex replied, and slammed the hilt of his blade against the terminal behind the judge, revealing the vote logs, the strike orders, the military positioning around Earth's solar system. Evidence. Undeniable. Collins stared at it in silence, then tried to reach for an alarm trigger. Rex had already fried it. "We're done playing games," Rex growled. "I'm taking this to the galaxy." He left the judge trembling and humiliated, sealing the door behind him with a blast weld. Then he headed for the War Games arena, a gladiator coliseum suspended in artificial gravity over the Concorde's core, a stage where the final test would be performed. The arena was meant for spectacle, for manipulation, for crushing the underdog in front of a cheering crowd of galactic bureaucrats. But today, it would host a different kind of event. Rex, armed only with his blade, gum, and a stolen comlink, entered the arena to face off against the Concord's chosen champion. The being that awaited him wasn't just any warrior. It was genetically engineered for combat, drawn from the DNA of 17 species, bred in war, trained since birth to read an opponent's thoughts and counter their movements before they finished them. The champion stood 10 feet tall, armored in bone and metal, and spoke only in a guttural dialect of challenge tones. It towered over Rex and hissed a phrase that roughly translated to, "This will be quick." Rex cracked his knuckles and smiled. That's what the last guy said. He's now a decorative stain in a crater. The duel began with an explosion of force. The creature struck first, claws slashing, movements too fast for most human eyes. But Rex wasn't most humans. He ducked, rolled, sliced at the weak point behind the creature's knee. It howled, surprised that the human had found a gap in its design so quickly. What followed was a dance of violence, Rex using terrain, debris, and even the creature's own strength against it. He didn't match it in size, but he outmatched it in unpredictability. Mid-fight, he taunted it. "You ever fight a guy who once took down a helicopter using just dental floss and spite?" The creature roared in confusion. Then Rex pulled a move even he wasn't sure would work. He feigned collapse, letting the creature stand over him in triumph, claws raised for the final blow. And just as the crowd gasped, Rex flipped up, drove his blade through the soft tissue beneath the creature's ribcage, and whispered, "Boom!" The creature collapsed. Silence filled the arena. Then the cheers. Not from the Concorde, but from the spectators from lesser species, the ones who knew what it meant to fight dirty for survival. Rex wasn't just representing Earth. He was representing every underdog ever written off by shiny uniforms and polished lies. And that was when General Fuzz made his appearance, dropping from a vent in the rafters and scurrying to Rex's shoulder, holding a data chip. The chip held the full recording of the Council's betrayal, their lies, and their plans to erase Earth no matter what. Bleep patched into the mainframe and broadcasted it to every screen across the galactic chamber. The Council members froze. The judge tried to object but was met with jeers. Delegates from neutral planets shouted for sanctions. One small jellyfish being actually slapped Colinth with a slimy tentacle and demanded his resignation. Rex stood center stage, bloodied, bruised, holding a raccoon in one arm and a stolen microphone in the other. "You want to call Earth uncivilized? Fine. We wrestle gators, we eat deep-fried cheese, and we start wars over football teams. But we've got loyalty, fire, and the guts to fight even when the fight's fixed. You want to erase us? You'll have to go through every last one of us. And trust me, we don't go quietly." The arena erupted. Somewhere in the distance, the vote was called again. And this time, the scales had shifted. Earth had allies. Small planets. Marginalized species. Rebels. All inspired by the madness and raw defiance of one unshaven, sarcastic Green Beret who refused to die quietly. As Rex stood in the spotlight, General Fuzz stole a diplomat's snack, and Bleep whirred proudly beside them. The galaxy had underestimated Earth. And now, it had to live with the consequences. The chamber had gone from roaring chaos to dead silence in seconds. All across the Starcourt, the members of the Galactic Concorde sat frozen, watching the aftermath of Rex Granger's duel unfold on the colossal holoscreens that encircled the arena. The champion lay motionless on the metal floor, its armor shattered, its body twitching in disbelief. Rex, battered and bleeding, stood over it without an ounce of theatrical flair, just breathing hard, sweat dripping from his chin, and a look that said he had plenty more where that came from. On his shoulder, General Fuzz sat triumphantly, munching on something he'd stolen from an alien dignitary's purse. Bleep buzzed softly beside them, projecting the final, damning footage of the Concorde's betrayal onto every corner of the galaxy's most sacred tribunal. The truth was out. Earth hadn't failed to prove its worth. The Concorde had failed to hide its lies. The silence cracked with the sound of 1,000 conversations erupting in every language, dialect, and frequency. Protests, outrage, laughter. A fish-headed ambassador slammed a tentacle on the table, demanding immediate impeachment of the trial judge. A reptilian delegate broke into applause, soon joined by a dozen others. The chaos grew louder, sharper. Yet in the middle of it all, Rex stood calmly, chewing the last of his gum and cracking his knuckles as if he'd just finished a light workout. Collinth, still dressed in his ceremonial robes and still smoldering from public humiliation, tried one final desperate move. He slammed a claw onto the override console and activated a security lockdown. The lights flickered. Emergency klaxons howled. And a massive force field slammed down over the arena, trapping Rex inside. "Enough!" the magistrate shouted, voice amplified to thunderous volume. "This creature is not proof of civilization. He is the very proof of chaos, barbaric, unhinged, and unworthy of our union. I call for immediate elimination." From hidden alcoves, Concord enforcers dropped into the arena, clad in obsidian armor and wielding plasma staves. They advanced in formation, weapons humming with deadly charge. Rex looked up at the sound, spat his gum into his hand, and stuck it casually on the hilt of his blade. Then he looked at General Fuzz. "You feelin' squirrely?" The raccoon screeched once, then leapt from his shoulder and vanished into the shadows. The first enforcer lunged, aiming straight for Rex's heart. He sidestepped, caught the soldier's arm, twisted, and used his own momentum to fling the alien into two others behind him. Plasma cracked through the air, grazing Rex's shoulder, searing the fabric away but missing flesh. He ducked under the next swing, used the weight of his attacker to break another's stance, and sent him flying into the force field. In the stands above, confusion erupted into physical conflict as allied species and rogue Concord members began to clash. The galaxy was splitting before their very eyes. Bleep zipped across the arena, darting between Rex and danger, deploying shields and distracting attackers with randomized alarm sirens. At one point, it projected a hologram of Rex moonwalking while juggling kittens, which confused the next wave of attackers long enough for Rex to knock them out cold. Meanwhile, General Fuzz reappeared atop the force field's emitter, chewing through wires with almost artistic focus. Sparks flew. The barrier fizzled. And then, with a sharp pop, it collapsed entirely. Rex grabbed a fallen enforcer's baton and turned just in time to face the last soldier. This one was massive, covered in plating and clearly a final contingency. He raised his weapon, growled a threat in a language Rex didn't recognize, and charged. Rex waited, unmoving, until the last second. Then he sidestepped and slammed the baton into a pressure point he memorized from the holographic anatomy archives the night before. The giant dropped like a stone. Colin tried to flee, but Bleep projected a force field in his path, trapping him. The judge slammed against it and fell back, now the prisoner instead of the puppeteer. Rex limped toward him, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles. "You picked the wrong species to mess with," he said, voice low and calm. Outside the arena, votes were being cast again. This time, openly. Dozens of ambassadors switched their stance, flipping their votes in favor of Earth's inclusion into the galactic concord. The final decision came down to one last swing vote, the sentient slime from the logic trial. Zerlux floated forward, slowly, thoughtfully, then pulsed a soft green hue and announced its decision in vibrating tones that translated clearly. "I vote yes. For the species that solves with chaos, sings with confusion, and survives through the sheer force of will. Earth is sentient. And hilarious." The chamber erupted again, but this time with genuine applause. Earth had won. Not through speeches or advanced technology, but through stubborn grit, improvisation, and the absurd, undeniable charisma of a man who trained raccoons and survived off coffee and spite. 2 days later, Earth's official status as a recognized member of the Concord was ratified. Embassies began forming. Trade routes opened. And a galactic tourism pamphlet mistakenly labeled Florida as Earth's capital of controlled madness, sparking an alien spring break boom. Rex stood at the center of the United Nations Council chamber, now filled with humans and aliens alike. A golden medal was offered to him, engraved with symbols from every known language. He looked at it, nodded politely, and passed it to General Fuzz, who wore it like a championship belt. "I don't need medals," Rex said. "Just a hammock, a cold drink, and the knowledge that nobody's nuking our planet this week." Reporters asked for his statement. He gave one. "We're a mess, sure. But we're our mess. And now we're your mess too. Welcome to the neighborhood." As the cameras flashed and the galaxy watched, Rex quietly slipped out a side door, avoiding the fanfare. He found himself back on Earth a few days later, walking the swamp trails with a familiar limp and a backpack full of alien tech he didn't trust anyone else to hold. General Fuzz returned to the treetop outpost with a slightly inflated ego and a taste for imported snacks. Bleep, newly upgraded with sarcasm software, decided to stay too, mostly because he liked Earth's weather and found conspiracy radio shows oddly entertaining. Rex set up his hammock between two cypress trees, cracked open a drink, and stared up at the stars. Somewhere out there, half the galaxy was still talking about him. Some hated him. Some loved him. But none would ever forget him. He took a sip, closed his eyes, and let out a long breath. Peace, however temporary, was earned. Then a low hum filled the air. He opened one eye. A small alien shuttle was descending just beyond the tree-line. Painted on its side was a symbol he didn't recognize, except it looked suspiciously like a dodgeball with wings. The ramp hissed open. A tall, armored figure stepped out and removed its helmet. Its skin was blue, its eyes sharp, and its voice was calm. "We heard about Earth. We came to challenge your champion." Rex didn't flinch as the armored alien challenger stared him down, the dusty Florida swamp winds curling around them like a scene waiting for a punchline. The alien was tall, lean, muscles coiled like whipcords under a sleek, obsidian armor that shimmered faintly with kinetic charge. He looked bred for precision, control, and poise. Rex, on the other hand, stood barefoot, wearing shorts, a tank top that read, "I wrestle better than I reason," and a half-eaten cho in one hand. He took a bite, chewed slowly, and looked the alien up and down like he was measuring a lawn-mower that might cut too short. The alien said, in perfect galactic standard, "I am Commander Virex of the Kralesh Combat Guild. We observed Earth's induction and demand immediate competitive verification. One-on-one contest. Champion versus challenger. Traditional format dodgeball." The last word dropped with ceremonial weight, as if it had just summoned ancient spirits, or challenged a bloodline. Rex squinted. "You traveled across 16 star systems to play dodgeball with a guy who owns a hammock and 3 lizards named after breakfast foods?" He looked over at General Fuzz, who had appeared beside him without warning, chewing on the alien's landing ramp cable. "Guess we're still underestimating just how weird Earth must look from out there." Virex nodded with solemn dignity. "This is how we test dominance in interspecies sporting engagements. Your records show this. Dodgeball is a sacred Earth rite of physical reflex, psychological pressure, and violent rubber spheres." Rex tossed the cho to General Fuzz, who caught it with military precision and cracked his neck. "Buddy, if you think dodgeball's just a sport, you've clearly never played it in a Texas middle school where the rules were made up and the trauma was real." Within an hour, a makeshift dodgeball court was erected in the clearing, lined with neon drones broadcasting the upcoming challenge to a rapidly growing intergalactic audience. Word of the match had spread like wildfire through galactic networks. The Council, still bruised from the Earth incident, had decided to allow the match under the clause of post-induction cultural evaluation. The crowd in orbit swelled. Aliens hovered in sky pods, streaming the game across moons, stations, and planetary grids. Earth, naturally, had picked up on it too. Suddenly, every sports bar, stadium, and sleepy living room on Earth was tuned in, beers raised, nachos forgotten. Humanity had a new sport on the galactic stage, and it was dodgeball. Because of course it was. Rex stood on one side of the field, shirt now off, chest scarred from battles and near misses. Beside him stood his hastily assembled team, General Fuzz, wearing a belt made from zip ties and a colander as a helmet. Bleep, who had reprogrammed himself into a ball trajectory calculator, and 2 local kids who'd been fishing nearby and immediately agreed to help after Rex promised them soda and interplanetary fame. On the opposite side stood Virex and 5 elite Kralesh athletes, tall and cold-eyed, each one carrying custom dodgeballs that hissed with plasma insulation and kinetic accelerators. Their warm-ups looked like choreographed dances of speed and murder. A booming voice from above echoed, "Begin!" The match exploded into chaos. Kralesh balls flew like comets, slamming into the dirt with enough force to leave craters. One zipped past Rex's head, taking out a pine tree in the process. The crowd gasped. Rex ducked, rolled, and launched a throw that bounced off a drone, looped back, and knocked out a Kralesh's leg. It wasn't even intentional. He winked anyway. General Fuzz launched himself off a stump and drop-kicked a ball into another player's face, landing with a raccoon-sized war cry and a triumphant tail flick. The kids used their small size to weave through chaos, hurling balls at angles the Kralesh didn't see coming. Bleep beat furiously, calculating ricochets with pinpoint accuracy and launching them through a custom arm cannon he built using junk from Rex's garage. Virex, unfazed, moved like lightning, dodging with such grace he might as well have been teleporting. Every throw he launched was precise and deadly. He eliminated the 2 kids in rapid succession, forcing Rex and his 2 oddball teammates to adapt. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't clean. But it was beautifully human. Rex, seeing a ball flying straight at Bleep, dived in front of it, taking the hit full in the chest. He grunted, rolled, and spat out dirt, but held up a finger. "Still in." "Grazed my side." The drones hesitated, analyzed the footage, and agreed. The final moment came fast. 1 Kralesh left. 1 ball in Virex's hand. 1 in Rex's. The crowd went still. They stared across the court, warriors with nothing left but their instincts. Virex flicked his wrist. Rex gripped his ball tighter. Then Virex moved. The throw came fast, almost invisible. But Rex had seen too many fights, too many sucker punches, too many traps and too many jungles. He didn't dodge. He sidestepped. And hurled his own ball mid-spin. Both balls flew. Both reached their targets. But only one connected. Virex was thrown off his feet, landing hard, the impact resonating through the field. The human crowd watching around the world erupted into screams and chaos. Everywhere else, aliens, rebels, bureaucrats, former skeptics, stood silent, then broke into cheers, laughter, or respectful nods. Earth had won. Again. But not just by brawn or freak accident. By heart. By chaos. By sheer, unrelenting unpredictability. Rex walked over, panting, and offered Virex a hand up. The Kralesh stared, then took it. "You fight well," Virex said. "Though you are insane." Rex grinned. "Yeah. That's kinda our whole thing." Later, as dusk fell and the field quieted, the last of the aliens departed, promises of peace, trade, and future games echoing in their wake. A new Galactic League of Dodgeball was announced. Earth was named a founding member. Somehow, humanity had turned survival into sport, sport into diplomacy, and diplomacy into a worldwide watch party. Rex sat on the tailgate of a truck, sipping sweet tea and staring at the stars. Bleep sat beside him, his eyelight blinking in rhythm with the cicadas. General Fuzz dozed in a toolbox, snoring gently. The 2 kids from earlier rode their bikes in victory laps, retelling the story to each other with wildly increasing exaggeration. Another ship appeared overhead, flashing diplomatic lights. Rex sighed. "Let me guess," he muttered, pulling his boots off. "Kickball this time?"